Roll call.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should have called it up.
Commissioner Javindal. Commissioner McCroskey.
Present.
Vice Chair Paulson.
Here.
Chair Del Rosario.
Present.
And Commissioner Jordan is absent.
Okay. Item 2, public comment. Looks like there are a couple of correspondences. And this is for items that are not on the agenda, so I think you're here for an agenda item.
The commission received several emails.
Yeah.
I'd like to just highlight the fact that we got an appreciative email about the Washington on the Hill project, which is great. And I don't know if you've heard other things, but it'd be great to circle back at some point and find out how that's working.
Yeah. Anyone else with any questions or comments? Anything we received? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to item 3, presentations. 3-1 is the monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Thank you, Chair, and Commissioner Jordan is present. 3-1 police data. So we have 2 months reporting for September and October since the last presentation. Pedestrian collisions were 1 in September and 3 in October. Bicycle collision showed 1 in both months. Vehicle collision incidents were 20 collisions, 3 of which were injury in September, and 18 collisions, 7 of which were injury in October. Moving citations issued 36 in September and 44 in October, and police reported 4 DUI arrests in September and 3 in October.
Question?
Could you go back to the non-injury collision? Yeah, so for the last 6 months, we've had really a higher rate over a longer period than previously, at least in this data series. I mean, there are single months that go over that, but it's been pretty sustained at a higher level over the last 6 months, which I haven't tested if that's significant in a statistical sense, but I would be surprised if it wasn't.
I think you're pushing there. Try it now.
Doing the wrong thing. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll repeat. The last 6 months have had a more sustained level of higher non-collision accident, non-injury accidents, collisions than any other period in this data series. I don't know if it's statistically significant, but I would guess it is, just from my knowledge of statistics. So I think it would be useful to perhaps have some geography on those. And obviously it would take a while for those to show up in TIMS, and I don't think TIMS covers non-injury collisions anyway, if my understanding is correct.
That's correct.
So, but non-injury collisions are potentially a leading indicator, and so to the extent that that is a leading indicator and that it does seem to be increasing, it might be useful to look and see if there's some hot spots in that data that can give us some idea of maybe where we need to look at taking action.
Any other questions or comments? I had something along the similar lines, and just looking at our DUI arrests and moreover moving citations, those continue to drop. Yet the other tables are not showing anything commensurate. I thought it would be good. I believe we have PD come in occasionally. Maybe we can have them come in sometime next year and just give us more detail on what's going on with citations, and maybe they can give some detail on Preston's request on non-injury vehicle collisions. But I think it's been a while since they've come in, so it'll be useful.
We're accumulating a lot of data, which is great. As we move forward, it gets a little harder to sort of read all the labels, and I'm wondering if some light gray vertical lines could be added for the year, if that's appropriate, or the quarter, whatever you think is easier to read. I think it could help us see yearly patterns, if there are any, and just help us frame what's going on in time.
So shading the years, is that what you're saying?
No, it could be as simple as just a vertical line to separate the years worth of data. And if it's possible, it'd be great to take the year number away from the month and display it separately in that space. That way you're not trying to read the whole thing every time.
Mm-hmm.
And the months become less important as you add a vertical line anyway, so.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. Doing year markers, then you can kind of see seasonal comparisons, and if we're having the same fluctuations throughout a year.
If there are any,
yeah.
That may or may not be inside,
Yeah, it could.
informative, but at least it'll help us frame the amount of time and the scale that's going on, and looking between the graphs as well.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we go to 3-2, shared mobility data.
So there's some changes in the data reporting in both of these. With gig, they showed 680 trip starts and 690 trip ends in September, and October was 747 trip starts and 785 trip ends. They've changed how they do their tracking to do where a trip starts and stops versus previously where we were recording a trip that started or stopped in Albany. So there's a difference in how we're getting the data. They've explained this to some extent as this new version allows them to help removing trips that weren't real trips and cleaning their data. This is part of how they've done a better reporting out of their trip data. And so that's how they've explained this. Looking at the difference between the two, they've said that they remove about 2 to 6% of the previous really reported trips through this cleaning. The gap in total trips shows about 20% being trips that probably started and stopped in Albany based on the difference from our older reporting of a trip that started or stopped in Albany. Just a useful piece of information potentially. So the new reporting has some double counting because it gets a trip start or a trip end. So that's just how we're getting the data. We could also report it as just a start or stop. They're about the same. Generally, in the 2 months we've gotten this, there have been a few more trip ends in Albany than starts. But they're comparable. So if there's a preference on how we report this out as one or the other, or the sum of both moving forward, let me know. But again, it reflects about, currently at least, where we have both sets of data, 20%. That is a start and stop within Albany for the same trip. The other report out from gig, there was a question last time about potential hearing about crime being able to use gig. I did ask the police department about that, and they hadn't heard anything specific with gig, but they said it was similar to crimes that have involved rental cars in the past. So they wouldn't be surprised, but it's not something that they've had evidence of in Albany at this point.
Questions? Preston.
They also, looks like they changed their metric for what is a member, and that went down. So I don't know if you have any insight onto that.
I don't know if that is also a reflecting of cleaning up of if someone signed up but didn't actually use or what. I'm supposed to sit down with them in about a week for some annual reporting that they want to share, and so I can ask about that, but they didn't explain, that difference.
Thanks. I guess the good news is the trend continues upward.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments?
Had just quickly on Lime before we move on. For Lime, their reporting has changed a little bit as well. So I haven't yet been able to get the last 2 months in the same form I had previously. They're supposed to now, instead of just giving you the document, they send an email, but the email hasn't come through. So I'm still trying to figure out exactly why the new version isn't actually coming to me. But I was able to report based on what you can view online in their portal. And it shows a pretty dramatic decline over the last couple months. I'm not sure if this has to do with transition in their scooter fleet or what. I haven't communicated with them about that.
Question?
In some sense, because they don't have a scooter fleet in Albany, really, I wonder if it would be useful to save staff time and discontinue this until there is actually a rollout. I mean, my understanding is there's stray scooters come into town occasionally, but they're basically waiting until they get a franchise agreement with Berkeley. And, if we're only talking 100 or 200 trips a month in Albany, I don't think it's really worth staff's time and our time tracking this.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. Anyone else have any opinion about that? Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather the time was put into outreaching or entertaining groups that want to bring micromobility.
Sure. The question about the table, since we do have it, what is the difference between the online chart and the raw data?
So the raw data is what I can pull from the portal as a city user for monthly trips, and the online chart, when you through that portal, they can give me daily or weekly or monthly charting, and they don't exactly coincide, and I don't quite know why that is.
Okay.
But one is one I can just access directly through the portal versus just
One that they're
summing up the
showing you,
numbers
yeah.
and their data they provide.
Okay. And they're diverging. So, and one question back on the gig data. The new data that we're showing on trip starts and ends is a combination of both, so that's why it's higher than the old total trips number, but it's not necessarily double because it's cleaned up a little bit. Is that right?
So the cleaning, they've estimated, removes about 2 to 6% of trips that were previously reported. The discrepancy here is previously we were reporting a trip that started or ended in Albany, and they were able to do that. The new version is just adding a trip that's a start in Albany and a trip that's an end in Albany. So one that's entirely within Albany or starts and ends in Albany gets counted twice. So approximately 20% discrepancy is why I was estimating that we can infer that that's about how many trips are just internal to Albany or have a start and end at the same trip in Albany.
Okay. Interesting. They changed it. Okay. All right, thanks.
It could also be that someone did an errand but kept the car until they returned as well. That would still count.
Sure. Any other questions or comments on either of these?
Yeah, that's true. I use them occasionally to go to Elstrade or Natural. So that would be start and end in Albany, even though it's really 2 trips from a transportation engineering perspective.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to consent calendar. 4-1 is the minutes from September 26th. Any questions or comments? Justin?
So I think under the traffic calming item, my recollection is that I raised the possibility of progressively lowering the 85th percentile speed or speeding, I guess you could say, criteria. It's 30 miles per hour now. And I was suggesting that we could lower it to 25, maybe start in school zones. So obviously we didn't make any decision on that, but that was a point that might lead us to review traffic calming, those criteria in the future.
Noted.
So is that a correction to the minutes?
That is a correction in the minutes. Yeah, I believe I recall bringing that up. I didn't review the tape, so I can't absolutely swear to it, but.
I'll move approval with that correction.
Great.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Abstain.
abstain? All right. Moving on to discussion items. Item 5-1, red curb request on Francis Street at the intersection of Tevlin Street.
I don't think I was the only one who wasn't here last time. Okay.
All right.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, 5-1, red curb request Francis and Tevlin.
Thank you, Chair. This item initiated with a couple of different requests. One from Waste Management that has difficulty navigating the turn out of Tevlin onto Francis, and was requesting either time of week restriction to help them with that turn or a red curb. There were also a couple of requests to review the red curb for visibility of the crosswalk that crosses across Francis and connects towards Terrace Park. As a little overview, this is for Francis. Tevlin is between Nielsen and Peralta. It is on the priority sidewalk network within the active transportation plan. It is a bicycle boulevard, and it also is near Terrace Park, and this is one of the main access points to the park. There were also several comments that came in this week raising, beyond those earlier requests, difficulty with visibility for vehicles exiting Tevlin. It's not something I looked at previously from the earlier requests, but we can talk a little bit about it and see if there's additional evaluation we need to do for that. There is, as you can see, a bit of an intersection geometry that I can see that would contribute to that. The Tevlin does curve, do a jog to the north before, or sorry, Francis does a jog to the north before Tevlin, so there could very well be some visibility issues with trying to see the traffic approaching from the west. So here's some views. This is the crosswalk looking the east side of Tevlin. The top view is looking to the west as you're westbound on Francis, and the bottom view is eastbound on Francis. The corner that Waste Management has expressed difficulty navigating, and the bottom view is that turn off of Tevlin to the right. The garage there is close, so there's a visibility component, but when cars park all the way to the crosswalk on both sides of the street, they have trouble getting into that lane. And they're currently, in terms of curb lengths, so the white vehicle there next to the crosswalk is in a approximately 20-foot curb length that's between the crosswalk and the driveway connection of that first house. On the south side of Francis, there's no driveway essentially all the way to Peralta, so it's a 115-foot stretch that's of curb length there. On the west side, I did just look at the aerials. It's approximately 70 feet to the first driveway. The one risk, so that's exiting Tevlin and that turn there that I was mentioning. Our recommendation is focused on that crosswalk and turn direction was for the full 20 feet in the north. Going shorter leaves sort of not a full viable parking space. And on the south, per our intersection and pedestrian visibility policy, 10 feet on the departure side to improve the visibility. And Waste Management has said they expect to be able to navigate the turn with just sticking with our visibility 10 feet there. Looking westbound, there is a geometry. It's a wider radius turn on that corner, and Francis does do a bit of a angled away. So that's the tight turn where some of the commenters have expressed difficulty viewing oncoming traffic while they're trying to pull out. There is potential risk with banning or restricting parking further back of vehicles being able to make that turn faster in a wider radius to the south, but Tevlin is a dead-end street, so there isn't a whole lot of traffic making that turn, but that would be the one counter consideration is you are forced to make a little more of a tighter turn with a vehicle parked there, but do have the more limited visibility. So that was just a note. I haven't done more evaluation in terms of assessing the visibility for vehicles. And with that, I presented staff recommendation. Happy to answer any other questions on that.
Questions from the commission? Yes, Ken?
Is the speed of traffic on the street a consideration in terms of getting out of Tevlin? Did you get that feedback?
We don't have any traffic survey data for speeds on Francis. It has been expressed both from the comments here and comments regarding that I've received regarding Francis and Peralta of the difficulty when entering or exiting because it is a narrow street, and the ability to view the traffic, but excessive speeding hasn't come up, I guess, directly.
Can you speak to the written comments? I think there was one about a mirror to help with visibility that has disappeared, and then I think there was another request for removal of parking on one side of the street to allow for better clearance.
Yeah, so the mirror, I have received a request in the past, and Public Works was going to look into that. I am unfamiliar with the history, but that was expressed that there used to be a mirror there that was seen as useful to residents on Tevlin to better see the vehicles approaching. So I can check in again with them and see if that's feasible for the city to provide.
We have any that the city provides and maintains?
I'm unaware of another location, but again, was unfamiliar with the history of this one. Regarding the visibility, my impression is that the red curb proposal on the east side of the intersection would improve vehicle visibility. It would help with the visibility eastward pulling out of Tevlin. The comments are also then to the west, and so I think the location to improve visibility would be adjacent on the south side, where there's currently a white vehicle here, would be looking at this stretch of additional red curb. So wasn't evaluated as part of the earlier request I received. We did notice this to the surrounding area as red curb consideration at this intersection, so it's within the purview of what we've noticed. It just wasn't something I analyzed, but I did estimate 70 feet of curb length, so if you were looking to do visibility on the approach, that's sort of, you can calculate the potential impact on vehicle parking.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
Are there stop controls at the intersection?
No.
Anything else? Okay, let's open up to the public. If you want to speak on this item, you can go ahead and come up, and you have 3 minutes. And then if you can, afterward, just fill out a speaker card so we have the record. Yep, please, to the microphone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, do I have to push a button, or can you hear me? As someone who has two pretty small children, I'm living in that house right there in the corner. Right there. So I'm very aware of traffic conditions going by. I'm very aware on Monday mornings of the garbage trucks, because my 2-year-old gets us all out of bed in the morning to go talk to the garbage trucks. So on one hand, I'm highly attuned to the importance of having good visibility for safety. There are a lot of people who pull off of Peralta and go racing down that narrow corridor. I'm not sure how much this would improve that situation, but I could imagine it possibly improving it. Haven't had any garbage trucks end up on my lawn, to my son's chagrin. I think he'd love that. So they seem to be managing. My primary concern with this proposal, and I'm sure you get this all the time, is with parking. I don't have a driveway. A number of the houses there do not have driveways. That might be our fault for buying the houses without a driveway. But the main reason is that there's this park. And I already have people parking illegally in that no driving zone, the dead end going to tennis courts, because they can't find parking on the street. And taking 3 more spots out, I don't know how that's going to actually work. So my 2 cents would be that the trade-off between visibility and parking is a pretty severe one. But perhaps and I wonder if there's other measures perhaps that could achieve the same result, whether it's mirrors or some combination of, Monday mornings when all 3 garbage trucks come within the same hour, perhaps would achieve most of the same result. That's it.
Great. Thank you.
Jennifer Hanson Romero, resident, 3rd generation. I visited this park many, many a times as a little kid, walked up these streets, everything else. I do know parking is horrendous around here. I'm kind of looking at this going, you're taking up 2 spaces here. Maybe they don't really need 2 spaces up top here. Maybe just the 1 space. I can see the cutting around the corner for the clearance is an understandable issue for the garbage trucks. I get that. But I think that they always ask for more, hoping to get at least a portion of what they're getting. So maybe even if you started with this and see where things went from there before approving all 3. Not to mention, I'd also look to open up the discussion of why don't we have parking down this Terrace Boulevard park area? Has there been a reason why we don't have parking there before? Has anybody looked into the reason that we don't have it there? And could it be put there? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And again, if you could fill out a speaker card, that would be great. It's good for the record. Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, back to the commission for comments.
So from visiting that intersection actually quite a few times, there's often a food truck, a small food truck, but a food truck parked westbound just before the crosswalk, which further degrades visibility for sure, and I would imagine access as well. And in general, I'm in favor of making that crosswalk safer, so I support staff's proposal. In terms of the narrowness of Francis, I'm wondering if doing the same red curb that has been authorized generally at Peralta would be helpful as well. I mean, because that crosswalk also has visibility problems. In other words, if somebody is using the sidewalk on Peralta going northbound on the west side of Peralta, you have vehicles right up to the crosswalk there. So it's pretty hard to see, but particularly given that it's a narrow street. I think having some red curb there as well would address part of what many of the written comments that came in discussed of people who lived on Tevlin, which is kind of that difficulty of people racing off of Peralta onto Francis. If it was possible for people to turn off of Peralta onto Francis and have kind of a resident spot, or people who are driving out of Francis onto Peralta to have a resident spot. In other words, if it was two lanes there, because the red curb, that might reduce some of the conflicts there as well. And I know that's not on the agenda tonight, so we can't take action on it, but I think it would be worth looking at that intersection as well. I do note that we also got information, we also got some letters about that intersection. So I think looking at that intersection would be useful.
Other comments?
Has Waste Management made comments about any other intersections in the city? Do we hear from them a lot about trouble navigating intersections? I just don't know if it's something we would regularly hear about, or if it's...
several years ago, I believe they worked with Aleda on some of the other streets near this. There is one other request we have from them that we're still working on that we will probably be bringing here. So since I've been here, there have been two, this one and one other.
In the other requests, did the city have similar, did we red curb areas, or do you remember how those were resolved? Or?
We haven't brought it to you yet.
Oh, so the one that elated.
Oh, the earlier ones. There are other stretches, I believe, that have had red curb. There is at least one case on, I think near here. There's some red curb to the north of Terrace Park that were at the request of Waste Management. And there's at least one location on Albany Hill that has a time of, like a day of the week restriction to help Waste Management.
In my 10 years experience, these requests have come up rarely before us from Waste Management, and usually, like with Albany Hill, it's been in terms of something we're changing, and they just want to make sure they don't get blocked.
Any other comments? Fareed?
Yeah, two things. One, the Francis Peralta intersection was one we looked at with Aleda a few years back, and there was a lot of concern there about loss of parking, so it was very sensitive. So just historically, that was a concern. In this particular intersection of the areas that we're looking at, I agree that the red curb on the north side makes the most difference for the crosswalk visibility and safety. And certainly large vehicles, making a turn, the outside of the turn is often a concern for them. So it seems like if we were going to pursue moving one car length, which is the 20 feet on the north side of the intersection, kind of gets us two things with one parking space removed.
Okay. Any other comments or a motion?
I'm curious. I don't know what the parking occupancy is on Peralta, but you just indicated that it's pretty high, apparently. And I wonder if that's also for the park. I mean, my sense of
Maybe.
Peralta more broadly is that the parking occupancy is pretty low, but I don't know if this is a hot spot.
We had a lot of residents come out expressing concern at that time, both sides of the street. And it didn't sound like it was necessarily related to the park. It was just parking for the residents themselves.
Was this request, was it instigated by Waste Management? Maybe I missed that.
That one?
I thought maybe, no, this one here, I sort of gathered it was instigated by Tevlin residents, but maybe I misread.
There was requests from Waste Management and requests regarding the crosswalk safety. There were separate requests.
It looks like we received 3 written comments requesting this.
And the northern red curb that's proposed is one parking space?
It's 20 feet length, so it's one standard parking space. I believe there was the mention of the food truck, the ice cream truck. I think sometimes it maybe is a little bit further back and a car squeezes in and goes into the crosswalk to sometimes use it as 2. But it's 20 feet, so it's a standard one parking space to the driveway.
So this proposal, staff's recommendation would take out 2 parking spaces, not 3, effectively, in terms of legal parking spaces?
Yes, it would be 10 feet on the bottom, which, based on sort of everyone fitting as parked in the visual, would remove that last space.
And what is the rationale for red curbing on the far side?
So that is visibility from a car going westbound. If someone is approaching from the south side of the crosswalk, that's the visibility concern for the pedestrian. I would just note also, as Tevlin visibility was mentioned in comments, that also would give a little bit better visibility of a westbound vehicle coming.
I guess I can see that because it's really effectively a one-way street. I mean, in terms of width. So when somebody's driving down it, it feels like a one-way street. So in terms of visibility for people crossing the crosswalk from the south, that makes some sense.
Sure.
So I will move staff's recommendation to red curb as recommended by staff.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, recommendation moves forward. Okay, moving on to item 5-2, red curb request at 635 and 665 San Pablo Avenue.
Actually, could I just make one addendum on the last one? So it seems like, given what we've heard tonight about people parking in that alleyway, which is really the path to the park, so I
Right.
can see why parking would not be
Fire
allowed
lane.
there. Fire lane as well, didn't think of that. And this red curb going in, I think after this red curb happens, to the extent possible, having a month or two of increased enforcement by the police department of no parking in this area to sort of set the right tone would be useful. I mean, if you already have people parking in the crosswalk now, who knows what's going to happen when this gets red curbed. So I think some enforcement attention here could bend the curve towards safety.
As long as we're not letting this go, can I propose something else that just came to mind? That spot on the north side, northeast side, is 20 feet long. What if we left a motorcycle parking space at the driveway end? That probably wouldn't interfere with visibility or navigation much. I mean, we're taking the whole thing because it's one piece. But if leaving a bit at the end for a different mobility.
I guess I'm worried, given the history, that if you give an inch, I mean, people are already taking a mile. So if you give an inch, then somebody's going to feel more emboldened to park their car there.
I'll just bring it up.
Anyone else with comments? I don't. Yeah, if you can come up and make it quick, thank you.
Has there ever been an instance where a red curb has been sort of retroactively removed due to comments or questions, or is history suggests that this is kind of, that this happens and it never gets changed? The reason I ask is because I think a lot of people are not tuned into this, and they're going to show up and see the red curbs, and a lot of people are going to be like, why, there's no parking? I mean, it does seem like it's only 2 or 3 spots, but you haven't had to carry a box, 100 meters up the street from Costco, from a Costco trip like I have, so just curious.
Question for staff, is there some sort of appeal process or?
Well, there's certainly, we're working on a more formal appeal process, but I think we could informally process an appeal if somebody wanted to do that. And we can also monitor this and see how it works. We don't very often remove safety improvements, but I suppose if we put this in and we get some feedback that it's not having the effect that people wanted, or it has an impact that people didn't anticipate, we can bring it back to the commission.
Yeah. Sure. It'll be a difficult thing to measure if it's working or not working. I guess it's not working. Yeah.
I guess it would be, looking at the parking patterns would be the thing
Sure.
that we could evaluate.
Okay.
So we walk
Do you wanna make a
here
comment?
lot. Hi, I'll add this to my other comment, but it seems like maybe we could give the residents a permitted spot or two who are gonna lose these in front of their houses, so that they could still park safely in front of their house and just have a resident-only permit or something, so we know that that's where they can park, or they could park on the little lane right there of Terrace Park, only residents of the neighborhood, so we don't take away their spots but make it safer at the same time, just to find a little different balance.
Thank you. The program exists.
So I can speak to that. We don't currently have any permitted parking administered in Albany at this time. We don't have a mechanism for that. And our enforcement of parking is on a regular basis is generally on our commercial streets. So that would be a new program and a new implementation. But certainly something to consider in the future.
Anything else on this item? Okay. Moving on to 5-2, red curb request for 635 and 665 San Pablo Avenue in front of Taco Bell and Pho Alsen. Staff?
Thank you, Chair. These requests have been made, so a couple different requests have come concerning safety of vehicles exiting the Taco Bell drive-through, and one regarding also the parking lot adjacent to that between the Taco Bell and Pho Alsen onto San Pablo Avenue. As discussed, this isn't really driveway access like a residential driveway policy. This is really a safety consideration and visibility for vehicles exiting the driveway. In terms of evaluation, it's benefit versus cost evaluation. In terms of the impact, it's on parking. It would be removal of parking spaces. We did survey the use of parking on the east side of San Pablo Avenue between Portland and Garfield, this block segment, and found at a Friday after hour peak, it was fully occupied. Even a couple spaces that aren't legal spaces were occupied. Other times a day were much lower occupancy rates that we saw, which are included in the staff report, but morning 33%, midday like 40, 50, 60% occupancy for that side of the block. In terms of the safety considerations, San Pablo does see high volumes and higher vehicle speeds, which gives higher credence to the visibility consideration. The faster the speeds, the less time you have to react to seeing a car coming as you're trying to pull out. On the collision history, there have been one in the prior history that we can view of injury collisions that involved someone pulling out of the Taco Bell colliding with a cyclist, and there was another occurrence earlier this year of a vehicle exiting the Taco Bell drive-through colliding with a northbound cyclist. So there have been 2 injury collisions, cyclist collisions from the drive-through exit. And in particular with cyclists riding on San Pablo, they're often trying to not take the full lane because of the speeds and volumes and are adjacent to the parking lane, which makes them that much harder to see from someone pulling out of a driveway. In terms of the driveway volumes, we did one observation of the volumes during the midday lunchtime, and there were 30 vehicles exiting the Taco Bell drive-through in that hour of observation, and 15 vehicles exiting the shared driveway adjacent to it. That was noon to 1 p.m. And then 33 vehicles entered through that shared driveway at that time. In terms of site conditions, so this is the block. It's the other safety consideration, which didn't come up in the collisions that were observed, is that it also is a drive-through that's very close to a crosswalk. So folks are looking at northbound traffic, they're looking to the left, and they're entering very quickly as they exit through a crosswalk. So that's the other safety consideration at this drive-through. In terms of site conditions, so this is just a view from the street. The Taco Bell is on the left. The drive-through exit is adjacent to the building to the left of that. And the shared driveway access between them is to the right. There's some photos of visibility as you're sort of exiting the drive. This is with 2 vehicles in those two parking spaces between the 2 driveways. This is looking from the Pho Alsen driveway. There aren't vehicles parked currently, but that's the curb stretch to the south of the shared driveway. The building does come pretty close to the property line, so visibility as you're exiting the building is pretty limited until you've entered the sidewalk zone. This is how it appears with one car in that space, and much more open with less parking. As you pull out closer to entering the driveway, those two parking spaces, cover much more of your visibility of oncoming traffic. This is the view to the right of the crosswalk adjacent to the next driveway.
If you can come up and comment, that would be great, but maybe we can wait until it's time for public comment. Thank you.
I think what the chair was trying to say is that we'll have a chance for you to speak. Okay.
Just some other conditions, descriptions. The driveway width at the street is 14.5-foot exit lane once it opens up with the flares. So it is narrow because it's a one-direction exiting driveway. The shared driveway to the south is 28 feet wide, and so it does allow a little more visibility because it has the entrance lane to the south of the exiting vehicle. The parking lot area that's shared also has an alternative exit directly onto Portland Avenue, so there is a little bit less of a need to, if folks have an alternative to exit if they're just going to the parking lot. So with the volumes that were observed, with the collision history, staff is recommending the two parking spots be removed in the spaces between the two driveways. There was a listing of potential actions of just removing one space, of not doing any red curb, some thought of if you had red curb of one spot between the two driveways and the first spot of the adjacent driveway, would that provide better gaps in visibility of getting a little more lead of seeing oncoming vehicles? But I think with the cyclist collision potential too, even having that sort of interim blind spot maybe merits just having the open space between the two driveways, but that was another alternative considered. And with that, I'll happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the commission?
Did we look at the occupancy of the parking lots?
No.
Commissioner Murkowski?
Was there any thought or consideration given to replacing the current use of the parking spaces with something else, like a drop-off zone or a bike corral?
No.
Are these areas used for deliveries? I see somebody nodding.
Wow. So one of the observed parking not in a viable spot was for loading of an adjacent business. So one observation of that, but I haven't done other delivery observations.
Other questions in the commission? I had a couple. Look back at my notes. So staff's recommendation is for the 46 feet of parking space removal directly in front of Taco Bell. Is that correct? Is there a visibility issue for the vehicles? I guess it would be exiting the parking lot behind Alcen. And if we would have to remove any parking there or have 20 feet of visibility there to the south of that driveway?
So one request to evaluate this that staff received did mention both driveway exits. So we did also consider that. I think you could choose to remove one of each. As I was saying, you have sort of some lead visibility provided by that from the Taco Bell drive-through exit as an alternative, or you could remove 3 spots to provide both. the lower volumes, the alternative of a Portland exit, and the wider driveway because it is two-way traffic were the reasons we were recommending focusing on the drive-through.
And then the 46 feet in between the two driveways, daylighting a higher amount than what's in our standards or guidelines that we've established. Is that a function of speed of San Pablo Avenue?
The guidelines we have for intersection red curb is for pedestrian visibility and really views of someone who's entering the crosswalk. With visibility for vehicles exiting, it is a function of speed. Essentially, you want a certain amount of time, stopping time. So higher speeds, you require further distance of sight to be able to have that stopping time. There are driveways up and down San Pablo. A few of them have red curb. Many of them do not. So it's not something that we have a policy or have established for San Pablo that we should be maintaining a certain level of visibility from every driveway.
And my last question is, left turns are legally allowed, correct, from these establishments or no?
The Taco Bell drive-through has a right turn only stencil in the exiting of the drive-through. I believe the recent collision was potentially someone making a left out instead of a right.
Okay.
We don't have a physical barrier in the middle.
Right, but you have the right turn stencils on both driveways, it looks like.
Yeah, in advance of the do not enter here, there's a right turn arrow stencil. Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, we can open it up to the, yes, go ahead, Amy.
For this block, do we know what percentage of the businesses have on-site parking, or what percentage rely on street parking?
I don't. There are at least, well, there are several businesses that do not. There are several lots that are smaller that probably do a mix of on-street to access the business and they're off-street.
Anything else from the commission for questions? Yeah.
Is this part of San Pablo on the normal circulation of our parking attendants or parking, enforcement?
I believe it's a 90-minute zone.
Sorry, so
I believe it's in a 90-minute zone. I'll see if I can double check that.
Anything else? Okay, we can open up to the public for public comment.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, my name is Nan Lee. I own 665 San Pablo Avenue, the first house. I used to Cicela before. So I've been with Cicela for 2005. And Taco Bell by that time, they don't build yet. Got an old small house. Okay, right now, they build. So I look in the traffic. Actually, I'm very close to that area. I'm in and out most every day. So only thing, when Taco Bell is right to at her property, that one make a right turn. Okay, most from Taco Bell, when you go out or outside Vietnamese, they make a right turn. They don't make a left turn. Only problem is the one truck, if the big truck park right in the curb, so you couldn't see the car coming down from the left. Only problem right there. The rest, if you can red curve, that about 3 or 5 foot, you can see the car coming down. Everything will be okay. Because I've been with that place. I own back in 2005 to now. I see very safety. Not many accidents or whatever. But the only thing, if the van, look like the van, park on the left-hand side, the car come out from Taco Bell or from outside come out, you couldn't see.
Right.
See the car come down, that's all. If the car, you might be see, but the van, you couldn't see. That's the whole thing. I look at it. I'm in and out there most every day. Traffic day, afternoon traffic, from right through. Everything okay there? Thank you.
If I can ask, are you in favor of removal of the parking in front of Taco Bell to help with visibility, or to the south of the Alsen driveway?
The front outside, look like, okay, you coming in,
Yeah.
the right-hand side, but you go now, the left side, van. If the van or truck parked there, you couldn't see the car from San Pablo coming down.
Okay.
That's all.
So that's for the Alsen driveway, correct?
Outside and Taco Bell,
Right.
yeah, we share.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Courtney Davidson. We own Ocean View Brewworks, so right next to this, so we watch this all the time. I think we actually brought up that accident that happened. So as a small business there, we are not in favor of giving up parking spaces on San Pablo Avenue. We would love for it to be safer, but right now, Taco Bell is not being asked to do anything to help make our sidewalks or our streets safer. You're asking the rest of us to give up potential customers and income, and we do hear from customers, oh, we would have stopped, but there was nowhere to park. And we did get a parking exemption, but we utilize our space to better serve the community than to park cars on our property. Whenever possible, we pull into our driveway when it's not the garden space and park our cars in there for deliveries, and we do our best to make safe deliveries. However, I don't think that taking away 2 parking spaces and having all of us impact the neighborhoods more or cross San Pablo right there is a better option. I think that asking Taco Bell to put up a sign that says right turn only, that says stop before people just roll across their sidewalk. They don't even look for pedestrians. So taking care of cyclists and other cars coming in is great, but making the people exiting the Taco Bell drive-through be safer is probably the #1 priority here. They just roll right from the window straight across the sidewalk, block the whole sidewalk, and then make their turn, but they can already see out more because they're halfway out there. So that would be our recommendation, would be to look at asking that business that makes a lot of money to help make their drive-through safer and not impact the other small businesses who are already facing lots of monitoring from the 90-minute parking zone that we're abiding by and trying to keep customers vibrant and coming to that neighborhood. So giving up 3 spaces right there would impact us. And I do believe we're going to lose parking lot spaces from Alsen if that development goes through. So then people won't be parking in that back space anymore. They will all be pushed onto San Pablo Avenue. So losing 3 parking spaces or some other alternative parking is going to impact your businesses there. Galvin, Ocean View, Taco Bell, Alsen, all of us who are on that stretch, Totsy, and bring in revenue for the city will be asked to give up parking spaces. So maybe we can look at other alternatives for safer exiting from a drive-through. Thanks.
Oh, can I ask a question also? It seems like your establishment is a popular bike destination.
Very.
So there was a question about possibly compensating the loss of parking with a bike corral. Would that increase patronage possibly for you
I
guys?
think it would be a great idea. I think we would have to be careful about how we monitor it so that we keep it as safe bike parking on a lot of different fronts. The clientele of Taco Bell can sometimes bring a lot of stuff with them that I would worry would get dumped in a bike corral area. So I think we would have to monitor that a little bit as a city. Oh yeah, the news racks that I had to ask because there was a dead squirrel in them for like a week.
Gee, who put that there?
I really think that this intersection is one that we brought up before because of the crosswalk's unsafeness. And we said we're going to put in the flashers, which is great. But this drive-through does add a lot. We just watched someone earlier today and yesterday whiz out of there, come in. We've got cars screeching to stop at that crosswalk. There's a lot to pay attention to. And people coming through the Taco Bell drive-through don't know the dynamics of that intersection like those of us who are there every day. So they're just coming through quick off and off the freeway, getting a quick snack, doing dinner, kids in the back seat on a cell phone. So I think there's a lot going on there that we could look at, and they're not looking at the sidewalk even. So I think we should maybe back up what we're asking Taco Bell to do and really look at the safety. And you can't see a right turn only if it's under your car or someone else's. That's another consideration.
Great, thank you.
All right, here I am again. I just like to comment on things. I can't help myself. All right. So I know two other people in this room at least remember what the old Taco Bell used to look like. Fareed is one, Alan is the other, I'm the third. It was set back quite a bit. So when planning and zoning agreed to this Taco Bell with their building so far out there onto the sidewalks, were there any requirements or specifications done around that parking right there, knowing that the visibility would be highly impacted? Because that building was set back at least, I want to say, a good 20, 30 feet, the original Taco Bell style building. Would you agree? So when that was done, I just want to know if this kind of issue or problem had been discussed. So I'd like city staff to go back and look at the notes on this and see if this was something that was supposed to be revisited at some point based upon this building design. Secondly, I'd like to say that, yes, I think a right turn only sign would be helpful. I'm never in favor of losing any parking spots. We've already lost, Jeff, how many parking spots when we put in the new flashers and the new safety walking? Where's that image? Could you go back to one of those new images with the walking pedestrian? Where is it? There was one where I saw.
Those are the three we've seen.
The yield. Where was the yield sign? The
Yeah.
crosswalks, the new crosswalks.
There they are,
All of
right there,
those
the
new
triangles.
crosswalks. Where is it? I'm not seeing it. Anyway, there's all the new crosswalks, and that took out quite a bit of parking already on San Pablo. So I want all of you to be aware of that. Anywhere where the crosswalks came in, they put red curbs in. I think it's a 20-foot red curb. So we have to be really careful about how much more parking we're impacting in this, okay? Also, if you want things to be safer, we've said this for years. We're going to continue saying it until it happens. But better lighting, more tree trimming. Stop putting the signs behind the trees, people. I mean, you want to be safe? Let's be smart and safe.
Thank you.
Just a side note on your right
Quickly,
turn
please.
only. Oh, sorry. Just a side note on your right turn only. There's just a curved arrow. There's no indication that it's right turn only. It only says do not enter, and then a tilted arrow. There's no other writing in their drive-through.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? Quickly, if you can. Thank you.
Hey, Jack, I wonder you can go back with the in and out from Taco Bell and outside, so I show you very clearly how people in and out, how the safety over there. Look. You're right here. So I'm talking about earlier, that if the car went parked right here, we couldn't see a car coming out from San Pablo. If we can red curve, not too much, so we can see that the whole thing about safety from this side right here.
Yeah.
Right here. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Before bringing it back to the commission, I'm not aware of the proposed development.
Yeah, there is an active application to put in townhouses on Kains, and
If you go back to the aerial view, I think it's easy to see or easy to describe.
Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately City Council will be taking action on a townhouse development project over here that will affect the parking in this area of the parking lot that currently serves primarily the restaurant, but probably maybe some Taco Bell customers as well.
Okay. Thank you.
How many units?
8 units, right? Is it 8 or 9?
We become 24. After we have a meeting on December 11th, so when after that, we have a 24
Oh, you're talking about parking spaces?
parking space.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's 8 units.
46.
How many houses? How many houses are you?
Only
8 or 9. 8 or 9.
Okay.
in the backside.
Yeah.
in the cane.
Great.
Not for sale. Each one you have our own parking.
Okay. Back to the, unless there's other clarification questions, we can take those now. No? All right. Back to comments to the commission. Who would like to start?
So, just highlighting the issues with regards to pulling out of that driveway from the drive-through. To me, I think having been through there, you're looking to try to see past the cars that are parked. Certainly, if you're careful, you go slowly across the sidewalk looking for pedestrians. Then you're kind of partway out into the street trying to see past those cars. And I would bet you 90% or more of the people make that right turn without ever looking to their right. That's a huge concern because they're so busy trying to see past the obstructions, they never think to look in the crosswalk. And that's our biggest risk. I mean, cars are generally going to be careful to try not to get hit as they're pulling out. And because it's difficult there, that's where all their focus is going to be. You don't have that same risk coming out of the shared driveway, but I do think that the suggestion of one red curb before each one does help. Certainly, it's not that there's no risk coming out of the shared driveway. Having the red curb sounds like it would be a useful thing there. As Justin pointed out, with more gaps in the parking, someone coming out of the Taco Bell driveway will have more opportunities to see the approaching traffic. I do think that the suggestion of stop sign, a right turn only sign, I think we kind of have to pick what we want to put up on those signs, especially since they would likely be on private property. But, right turn only certainly may be something, but if we can get something at the curbside that says look for pedestrians, with an arrow to the right, maybe that would be useful.
Yeah, the possibility on private property is pretty limited, just to note. The do not enter sign here, if I took a picture, I think, it's in the very top left here, and it's close to the building, and half is obstructed until you're like very far out. So I think the one real opportunity is the new yield ahead post that Caltrans put up in advance of the crosswalk would be something that, since drivers are going to be looking to the, the northbound traffic, something there they might catch their eye before they enter.
I think that a sign, maybe a signpost right behind that one with the signs 90 degrees, so they're facing towards the driveway, saying right turn only and watch for pedestrians. Those, to me, are probably the most critical messages we'd want to convey, and they're within our right-of-way. I do like the idea, by the way, of if we red curb it, putting in a bike corral. Because then you're putting in half a dozen parking spaces for the one you took out.
Right.
Just a different kind of vehicle.
The comments?
Yeah, and I think the worldwide research indicates that would increase business for the kind of businesses that might be losing parking. As far as adding a sign, so I agree, I don't think you can add a sign to that post by code, because it's got to be higher up, right, or by whatever the regulations, yeah. So you'd have to add another post. If you go back to the aerial view, I'm wondering if some, and I'm not seeing this, so maybe I'll ask Fareed for his creativity. It occurs to me if the southern driveway is made only in, since there's an out onto San Pablo, maybe there'd be some way to reconfigure the space in there to get more off-street parking? And
You've already got 90-degree parking. You're not going to get more efficient than that.
So like I didn't know if maybe there'd be a way to.
If you had valet stack parking, you could use the aisle to park, but
Yeah.
then you need space for people to back out of the parking spaces to the south.
Yeah.
Valet parking.
What?
You could increase the density by valet parking.
Well, yeah.
I'm not saying it's
I personally think it
practical.
would be hard to enforce a one-directional driveway.
Huh. Yeah. Okay.
Preston, I'm sorry, one of you was saying that you think it would be hard to add a sign to the post that's at the edge of the curb?
Yeah, just that you'd have to add another post, because you can't have a sign that low by.
If
Right, or you
if
could
attached
shift the
sign
post
by
a little
the
bit.
edge, you could sort of have, signs like this on the post.
Right, if it doesn't stick into the driveway too much, but certainly that you could move the post, or you could figure that out. Well, they'd have to notice. No, certainly there could be some, we could leave that up to staff, but the idea would be to have a sign in that general location.
Given that cars are turning right out of the driveway, they're not going to clip the sign. As long as it's not overhanging the driveway. So we'd have to check the sizing, but I mean, from the.
I've driven through a lot of drive-throughs, and I think drivers are quite creative at the space that they use.
That's a fair point.
I don't think you want to give them a target.
Well, it would.
Could extend the height of the signpost. That's doable.
But then would they see it? It's yeah, so I would leave that to staff, but.
If you guys want to make comments, if you can have you guys come up to the mic.
If you want to.
So we are on television for the many thousands of viewers at home. So if you guys can come up.
Not to mention the recording of the minutes.
Recording the minutes, yes, there's that too. So yeah, if you have comments to make, please come up and I'd be happy to give you a few.
Actually, I met somebody the other day who says he watches every meeting.
For him.
Never seen him here.
Additional, he doesn't have to.
So just a question. Did Taco Bell comment about this, or did they?
Respond.
There were
Respond,
incidents,
no, okay.
right?
So the space between the two driveways is how long? What was it?
46 feet,
And then how long is a parking space?
22 feet.
Okay. Because I agree visibility could be better here. I think for the plaza, I am concerned though about removing parking on a commercial corridor, especially if there are businesses on this stretch who don't have on-site parking, like they are relying on these parking spaces to serve their customers. I do like the idea if we had to take one to turn it into some other bike parking or something so it could be used, but I am hesitant about removing all of that parking just wholesale. So.
Okay. I would be supportive if someone made a motion to.
I'm still got some comments.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Please.
if I may. In light of the fact that the red space is already being parked, how likely is it that adding red spaces will be enforced or observed? I guess is one question. And certainly putting a bike corral could help enforce that. So that's a benefit there. Recent red curbs in my neighborhood are actually hard to see under the LED lights, specifically at the northeast corner of Santa Fe and Solano on Santa Fe. You can talk yourself into it being gray, and many people do. So just a consideration. Another benefit of having a bike corral is that it reinforces the edge of the traffic lane and doesn't look like the street's wider. Comments were about sidewalk versus street. I think we're really responding to actual injuries here on the street. So I think we should consider everything, but that should be the main focus of our response because they're documented injuries. And it wouldn't hurt to check the development or the requirements of the, I'm sorry, I'm not coming up with the right technical term, but the building requirements for the recent or more recent building of the Taco Bell in terms of what they were supposed to provide in terms of signage and whatever. I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting. You guys talked about the flashing beacon at this location, I think. Can we point an extra flashing beacon towards this driveway on that east side of the street so that the light actually shines at the vehicles who are coming out of this driveway? Directionality seems to be pretty important with lights, and even if you're not looking in that direction, I think that could help. That way, if I was walking southward, which I have done a couple times a week for a long time, I could always push the button and have that flasher going, and if I thought somebody wasn't paying attention, just on the sidewalk. But
So on the near side before you're crossing, you'd have the lights face angled a little bit.
I would
towards the
add
driveway.
a flashing light to reinforce that crosswalk so that motorists who aren't focusing right when they're watching traffic have a light that's pointed at them that would alert them to somebody in the crosswalk, if that's possible. So yeah, I'm in favor of, I think, at least taking one spot at the north edge, I'm sorry, just south of each of the two driveways. And just based on where the bike racks are now, you'd probably want to take that one in front of Taco Bell as a bike corral. And the fact that the bikes are lower than most cars would provide plenty of visibility, I would think. And mounted riders would be higher than those bikes, so that wouldn't be an issue either.
Other comments?
Is that a motion? Could it be a motion?
I propose that we designate the first parking spot length south of each of the two business driveways as red curb, and that the northern one be designated as a multi-spot bike corral.
I'll second that.
Could we,
So we would, I'm sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah.
So we would lose 2 vehicle spots, but one of those would then be replaced by corral. Okay,
So in terms of numbers of people who could arrive,
yes.
it would actually go up.
well, yeah.
Can I add an amendment to that to look into adding signage facing the exit that designates it as a right turn only and watch for pedestrians? And to consider the possibility of modifying the flashing beacon design to have a beacon that's visible from the driveway when pedestrians are crossing San Pablo. I'm purposefully leaving that kind of open-ended
Yeah.
because there's going to be
Yeah.
some geometric and other considerations there. But if it can be done, I think that would definitely draw attention to the pedestrians that are in the path of right-turning cars as they make that turn.
It's been a while. Can I just say I accept those friendly amendments? Okay.
Thank you. And I'll second it.
All right. Staff, you got the motion and the amendment?
It's red curb of 1 car length south of each driveway, plus with the intention to use the one adjacent to the drive-through as a bike corral, plus signage for right turn only and watch for pedestrians, and considering modification to flashing beacon design to add visibility to the drive-through exit.
Specifically to be visible from the drive-through exit.
I would further modify that to be visible from the drive-through exit on the south side of the exit driveway.
The signs should be to the south side because that's where people are looking. The flashing beacons may still be by the crosswalk.
Yes.
But again, it's much easier to see a flashing beacon out of your peripheral vision.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Preston.
So I have a question about the length of the proposed red curbing south of the Alsen driveway. Since it is a two-way driveway, it already has more visual clearance. I mean, it has, half the visual sight lines that this would have without that northern parking space. So I'm wondering if, I don't know what the length of the curb is there from that driveway to the corner. If it's if it's not an even increment of 20 feet, then maybe we don't want to take out 20 feet. Maybe we can take out 10, preserve the parking, and improve the visibility. So I don't know if staff can go into Google and give us a measurement
So we
on
can
that curb length.
How about if we amend to give staff flexibility to find an appropriate length based on the number, on an even number of parking spaces lengthwise?
That's fine with me. So basically, the intention is to preserve the number of parking spaces, if possible, with providing, at least 10 feet of red curb? I mean, I think they need some guidance on the minimum length. So say, if you can get 10 feet of red curb and preserve the number of parking spaces, then do that. If it's 80 feet long, then you have to take out a whole parking space anyway, so take out the whole parking space.
105 feet.
Yeah.
Good number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is, it's unmarked, there's no Ts, so how do people actually end up using it? I mean, a regulation space, is it 22 feet? Is that?
Right.
Huh. Okay, so that'd be 88,
Plus
17.
to red.
So the image on the screen right now, Google Earth has a full 5 vehicles look like they're comfortably parked there right now.
Yeah. So 22, so it'd be 110 if it was,
Your corner can be small.
right, I'm just saying if it's full 5, yeah, so it'd be 110, so you're gonna lose a spot, basically. But if you don't want to go 20 feet, because then you might lose 2 spots. Because if regulation is 88 feet, then you only want to paint 17 feet. If we mandated painting 20, then people will probably pack in, but I'm more in favor of going a bit shorter, either because there might be smaller vehicles and people can strategize, just leave some flexibility.
Is that a truck on one?
So I don't know how.
Last vehicle does look very close to the driveway at the
Yeah.
top.
So I don't know how short to go. I'm still inclined to something like 10 feet because even at a little less than 100 feet, there are times when 5 motorists in smaller vehicles might be able to park
If
there.
we just add 10 feet, the people who are parking will work it out.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
If you want to make a quick comment, that would be great. Maybe please come up to the microphone. So first,
Sir,
you can
if you
start
could-
at the microphone. Thank you.
Sean Charles, Albany Chamber. I was going to ask, is there a standard that the city is going by, or are we just kind of making things up as we go? Because for me, I would be concerned more about the businesses that are losing parking, obviously, on San Pablo Avenue. Being from Albany, I've been in the city since my life, and that Taco Bell has kind of been there. I'm not sure what's precipitating this, since I don't see any representation from Taco Bell here. And my concern would be, I mean, by setting this precedent, are we setting a precedence for all one-way lanes making a right or left turn on San Pablo Avenue? So, I mean, just the decision you make, just be wary about, you know, the long-term effects of it. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. There is information in the staff report, so on the incidents that happened that are prompting us to look at this. So if you review the staff report, that talks about the accidents that happened.
Yes, I think numerous injury accidents is what's motivating it. And also these are particularly high volume driveways in terms of their usage as compared to a lot of the businesses along here. And also the topography of San Pablo here, it's kind of dropping away, if you will, which also reduces visibility. So in other words, it's a bit downhill to the north, but then as you go to the south, it flattens out. So there's a bit of a rise there. So all those factors together make visibility much more problematic.
So our standard at intersections is 1 car length on the approach. If I can offer what we use in Berkeley, where people ask for red curb adjacent to driveways without significant issues, it's 3 feet for a residential driveway, 5 feet for a commercial driveway. In this case, we're kind of looking at San Pablo as a higher speed. We have a number of incidents that have happened there. So our starting point was 1 car length of red curb. We're trying to negotiate it down to something less to minimize the parking impact.
Right.
If the concern is that by negotiating and being creative in order to save parking, we're going away from standards, we could go back to the full car length space, but I really don't think we need to. I think 10 feet of red curb, given the circumstance here, seems very rational. It's not something that's going to apply to every driveway. This is, I think, a fairly special case given the geometry where the building is, the location of the crosswalk. All of these things come together to create a special circumstance. So I think our trying to be creative is appropriate.
Sorry, one more quick thing. Could we look at doing just 5 feet on the Sen southern driveway, and then you can do the parking space with the corral on the Taco Bell one that's had accidents at it? So maybe we just keep the 100 feet for in front of Sen, and then don't lose any more than we have to there. And then we get the bike corral, which is okay, and the safety around the Taco Bell drive-thru, which is the one of concern.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor, and I think we're making lots of amendments to it. So,
I accepted the first amendment.
Correct.
I'd like to accept the second amendment at 10 feet.
Hard at 10 feet or at?
About 10 feet. I'd like to give staff a little flexibility. And in response to the comment, I think both of those spaces affect the visibility coming out of the Taco Bell driveway. Based on the pictures we've seen and the description I've heard from staff. Was there anything else we needed to?
I think that covered it all. We can have staff.
I'll second.
You want to have staff read it back to us really quick again? One more time, sorry.
Sorry. So the motion is for red curbing 1 car length south of the Taco Bell drive-through and about 10 feet south of the Faux Alcen, with the Taco Bell drive-through car length to be designated for a bike corral, plus signage for south of the drive-through exit for a right turn only, and watch for pedestrians, and consider modification to flashing beacon design to be visible from the drive-through exit.
I would modify the last sentence. I really want to be pointed at the exit from the point, to be pointed at the point where the car is exiting the Taco Bell property onto the sidewalk. And then it should be visible from further back and further forward, but that's really the point of.
That's fine. I mean, the intent obviously is for it to be noticeable to drivers exiting the driveway.
I just feared that the way it was worded,
No, that's good.
if it was just pointing south from the standard sign, standard configuration, that would be visible from.
Yeah, you could see the side of the beacon from the driveway, and that's not doing what we want. We want one pointed at it, so I agree, that's good clarification.
Okay. So there's a motion and there's a second on the amended motion. We have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, recommendation moves forward. Okay, figure out my computer again.
We invite you to stick around for the rest of the meeting.
Moving on to 5-3, more red curb. Red curb request at 934 Kains Avenue adjacent to driveway.
Thank you, Chair. So this request is essentially an edge case scenario of our driveway red curb policy that was established this summer. The policy identifies curb lengths where we would consider additional red curb adjacent to a driveway where a resident has had issues getting their driveway blocked. It establishes a framework where if it wasn't going to remove a parking space, it would be approved at the staff level if the driveway narrowness supported that. This case has a red curb applied previously, as shown here, which expands it to approximately 11 feet, a few inches above, which is pretty consistent with our now established policy. The curb length for the vehicle on the left here to the south of the driveway to the next driveway is approximately 14 feet. With the permitted parking length with the existing red curb closer to 13 feet, approximately 13 feet. So that's within the range in our policy, greater than 12 feet, less than 19 feet, that the policy considers this reducing a parking space. So the recommendation that staff put forward is what's consistent with the policy, which is to deny the request. But the policy does establish a framework for the commission to evaluate this as an appeal of that, weighing the needs and the issues raised by and the need for access of the private property owner with the public use of the space. So in terms of evaluating the applicant's need for the curb space, they've expressed a long history of vehicles parking in a manner that blocks the driveway and calls to police to remedy that. They also identify some development history that bears consideration. The development next door occurred approximately 10 years ago, and it created a smaller space when that development was evaluated. A vehicle was shown in the existing space, so that a conversation at that time highlighted the only one parking space was removed with the new development and the wider driveway, but it did create this very small space as a result. And then the third issue that the applicant brought up was medical need, that they have medical issues that create increased demand, which is why they've raised this again. So they did work with the transportation planner after the development went in, and they did agree on the red curb as shown, trying to preserve the parking space. They understand that parking is tight on Kains, and they've tried to work with what they were given, but they've continued to have issues, and they would like the space to be red curbed or something to be done to ameliorate what they continue to experience. So with that, I had a few photos. This is from Google Street View, which is a little deceptive why I showed the two bottom ones because with the camera showing 360 degrees, it sort of points multiple directions and looks a little different when you look at the views from below. This car is pretty tight, but it fits more or less.
Is that a Prius?
That's a Prius. It's maybe a few inches over, kind of, but not as dramatic as the top picture when you look at the other angles. When I went out there, this vehicle had a little extra space on the north side, and then on the south side was past where the flare is, but not in the full driveway approach of the driveway to the north, driveway to the south. And with that, happy to answer any other questions.
Questions?
Oh, and just to note, so I had a conversation with the applicant, and they submitted a letter. They expressed that they would have liked to have been here to make their case, but weren't able to make it tonight.
Thank you. Questions from the commission?
So they've had cars towed? Did we read that in his letter? He's contacted the police department about towing cars that have been...
I know they have contacted the police department multiple times. I'm not sure if it resulted in vehicles being towed or not.
Other questions?
Did staff consider putting parking tees out on the far side of the car space, park space?
So that is another alternative. I think the challenge with tees is it is going to continue to be a very small space. So tees plus identifying it as a subcontact, compact, whether that discourages someone who's in a slightly larger vehicle from continuing to park, I don't know. But that would at least give another cue as someone's approaching a sense of the space that's there.
The flares looks pretty generous. What's the legal limit of the parking space? Is it the line that marks the driveway continuation, or is it the flare itself?
My understanding that it's once the curb goes back to its full height is really where the start is of parkable space.
That's the legal or ticketable requirement?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Other questions?
Are the parking garage in the newer development there, is that stacked parking or is it just one space per garage? Do you know?
It's tandem is too deep.
Yeah, okay, it's now right.
Other questions? I had a question about what would that be, the north side of that driveway? Does that need some red curb as well? It looks like cars are parked right up to the tapers and beyond.
North side has a little bit of red
curb there.
curb.
Here, look at right here, in color, a little bit of color. So it's on north and south.
Okay. There's some there. All right. Anyone else with questions? Public comment? I don't know if anyone is interested in commenting on this. All right, we'll keep going. Back to the commission for comments.
So rather than tees, I wonder about what I see some places, and I think it's more feasible because this was just sealed. I believe it was chip sealed or slurry sealed, so it's a better surface of actually painting a box and then writing compact in it, which is a stronger visual cue than tees. So as you say, as somebody's coming to it, it's more obvious, well, there's something going on here, and they have to think about it more and make a more conscious decision to violate if they're going to violate, rather than kind of ending up there and going, it's good enough. Now, I don't know if that exists anywhere else in Albany. I don't know. Again, I don't know what's precedent we'd be setting, but that was the one idea that came to mind, potentially to solve it without losing the space and not going against the standard that we just adopted as a city.
I kind of contemplated that too. I think if we do red curb within the driveway, we could probably get to about the same result. What's the date?
Within which driveway? You mean on the flare or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, normally your red curb extends from the flare towards the rest of the curb. Here we're so tight that anything we do, even formalizing the flare, is prohibited parking. is pretty much going to make the space not useful for anything except a really small car. But if we make the red be as short as what we're seeing in this image, and have it within the flare, basically, you can red curb driveways.
Wait, so I'm confused.
is
This is the driveway that gets blocked, and it's already got the red on either side. The other driveway is not a problem.
Okay. Oh,
That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I would say that having the flare there on the south side of the parking spot encourages people to pull further back because you're at the front of your car, that's what you're seeing.
yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is you wouldn't want to red curb that flare, or even if you legally could, because you'd be pushing people further back towards the other driveway, which is the more the problem. I mean, this one, the driveway is 3 cars wide, so somebody blocks part of that driveway.
Lots of maneuvering space to get
It's
out.
not the end of it. It's not the end of
You
their
want to
access.
encourage, for example, this Prius to pull as far forward as they can, so
Right.
lots would do that. The other thing that would potentially do it is if your red curb is in the driveway but not the flare, then it sends a message that it's okay to park within the flare.
But can we actually red curb part of a driveway? I mean,
Driveways are already prohibited for parking across, technically,
yeah,
under state law.
It's
So
implied.
I see. Okay.
making it red is kind of redundant. You shouldn't have to do it.
Oh, I see. But it's a
But if
queue.
we're
You
kind of
can
providing a queue,
pull forward and cover the flare,
Yeah.
essentially.
So you would prefer the red curb in the driveway versus the T that formalizes the flare as part of the parking
you
space?
could do a T. A box starts to get to be kind of a lot. I mean, I do sort of like the idea of painting compact on the street, except we really don't have that anywhere. And so trying to go with here's the limit, fit within the limit, don't care what kind of car you think you drive. If you fit within the limit, you're fine. A box would do that, a T would do that, maybe a little bit of red curb to define the limits would do that. I'm open to any of those. I just a little hesitant to paint a box because, then the next person is going to say, I need one of those.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a lot more that requires more maintenance, whereas curbs are pretty easy to maintain.
So the policy again was if red curbing was painted on adjacent to a driveway to the standard, and there was more than 12 feet of curb that would be left, then it wouldn't be red curbed. I mean, 12 feet is not a parking space. I'm surprised that length is so short, if I'm understanding that correctly. I guess
There's a growing number of models that do fit in that space, so
Okay.
it's the challenge. The edge cases, there are cars that do fit, and so it's taking a space, but that's also the space that has the most issue because there's more cars trying to squeeze into it when they don't fit. So that's the challenge. That these are the scenarios that have the most problems, but there are a growing number of vehicles that do fit in that.
The good thing here is you've got a driveway on either side, so maneuvering room is not an issue. If bumper to bumper your car is 12 feet or less, you're okay.
Right, well, the 12 feet is specifically driveway to driveway. I mean, that's what the criteria applies to, not in some other case. Yeah, I mean, obviously a larger conversation, but it seems like between 12 feet and some other length, there needs to be an addition to the standard of what happens in the street to try to cue people to not just assume it's a parking space if you have a large full-size pickup truck or something.
I think red striping in the driveway south of the seam that we see that starts the flare, putting the T's to mark the edges out in the street, that the northern T should just about line up with the telephone pole, which creates a really nice way to sort of get your back end in there and align it with the space. I would move that we paint the driveway red south of the cement seam and add T's to the road.
So would it be for the front, would it be at the top of the flare then? Is that?
I'm proposing that in this picture, adjacent to the bumper or just behind and to the left of the bumper of the Prius, The flare is that triangle that goes behind the car, and it starts at the seam of cement that's in line with the planter bed. And I'm proposing that the red curbing would start to the left of that seam.
So basically, it would indicate that parking in front of the flare is legal.
Yes. And that
Is
would
the
be
goal.
reinforced by the T out on the street, aligned with it, and another T aligned with the edge of the red curbing at the northern edge.
And the flare looks like it's about maybe 2 feet, 2.5 feet at curbside. So that would actually end up resulting in queuing a 15 to 16-foot space. Okay.
If we were to redo that development project today, I think we would probably narrow that driveway anyhow to be something like that. We don't need that wide of driveway for moving cars.
Yeah, it's a great turning radius, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, you might have a double wide and then go triple wide as you get onto the property. Yeah, yeah. It would be great if we could get the owner to agree to that. But,
All right.
so I'll second, I think it was a motion. Was that a motion? Yeah, I'll second that motion. Maybe with the addendum to have a 6-month check back with the, I don't know if it's applicant is the right term, in terms of how's it working out, has what the city has done to try to thread the needle on this made any difference or not?
6 months after it's implemented,
Yes, thank you.
accepted.
Okay. All right, motion and a second. Let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the recommendation moves forward. All right. If I can ask the audience, are you guys here for 5-5, Bollards on Solano? We can, if it's okay with the board, can we skip to 5-5 and come back to 5-4? Is that okay? All right.
Sure.
Just one other little
Yes.
piece of meeting management I should have mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. At 10 o'clock tonight, the water is going to be turned off to this building. So
Better
either might want to take a break.
take
or-
take your chances now.
Bio break at 9:30?
Why don't we can hear this item and then we can keep going. All right, so we'll skip 5-4 and come back to it. We'll go to 5-5, Bollards on Solano.
Yeah, can you pull this up? So this summer, we had a couple of incidents where vehicles parking on Solano Avenue, the motorist in the vehicle inadvertently drove over the curb and into two restaurants, Zari's and Raj Cafe. Fortunately, there were no injuries. There were some close calls, but no injuries. And although there was significant damage to the storefront, no structural damage to the buildings. The commission received some public comment, at least one or two of your meetings, I believe, from the owners of Zari's asking that the city look into some sort of bollard treatment to keep, and this was, in Zari's case, it was the second time it's happened. So it doesn't happen very often, but they've had a stretch of bad luck. This is in response to that request to have a discussion about this. Normally, a 6-inch curb like we have on Solano Avenue would be the typical way to protect pedestrians in storefronts, but it obviously didn't work in this particular case. There are other features in many areas that protect the sidewalk, whether they're trees or signs or streetlights and so forth, but there are other areas that are fairly exposed. And so this is really kind of a discussion item for the commission to give us some direction on how to go forward with this, whether we have a case-by-case policy or we want to develop something that's more consistent throughout the area. It does create the issue of a lot of things going on in relatively narrow sidewalks with bollards and As I mentioned, trees, bike racks, street lights and so forth, outdoor seating as well. So we're looking for just kind of a general discussion. We do have some images of potential bollards to help facilitate the discussion. And I think you're going to get some public comment about this as well.
Questions from the commission? Thank you, staff.
Were there any human injuries involved in these incidents?
In the second incident, Raj, the driver was evaluated for a pre-existing medical condition, but it was not, there were no injuries caused by the motor vehicle striking anyone.
Okay. And we're assuming these were unintentional?
Yes.
Okay.
And no impairments or anything like that.
Preston.
My memory is that there was a third event, which still you can see the damage to the building. It's the east end of the building that has Raj Cafe in, along with various other businesses, and the wall is still pushed in there.
There was, I believe, I don't know the details of that.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if it was somebody jumping the curb from a parking space or like really missing the driveway by a lot, because it's not the corner of the building, it's back from the corner of the building, so they would have really had to, if they took the driveway, they would have had to be almost driving down the sidewalk to hit that part of the building at that angle. So my point is, there's been three in three different spots.
To my knowledge, I don't know the details of that one. On the other two, I went to the scene because there was needed to evaluate the condition of the building. On that one, it was apparently relatively minor, and it was determined that the evaluation of the building wasn't required.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it now, I would say it is impaired, although it's on the north side, so it's not really, tends to get rain there, but it's impaired the waterproofness in the building. I mean, it's pushed in, the stucco's broken, and it hasn't been repaired. I mean, that's the building owner's decision, but it's not without consequence, potentially. If they don't deal with it, eventually it might cause dry rot in that part of the building.
The stucco's not waterproofing.
Well, whatever's underneath it might be damaged. We don't know. We don't know.
There was another incident, I think like 10 years ago, up at Carmel in Solano. A car went through a nail salon. I think it was like 10 years ago.
There is a Jerome Blanc clock, I think it is, that got damaged probably about 5 or 10 years ago. It happens from time to time.
The three incidents that you guys are referencing in this report, were they all from a parked car position, and then instead of going reverse, they went forward? Is that?
No, it was a person, in both cases, the details of the two I'm familiar with, it was a person parking the vehicle, entering the parking space.
Instead of pressing the brake, press the gas or something like that. Okay.
Do you know if they were turning left or right into the space?
I don't know for sure.
Did staff look at, or would they be effective if you looked at tire stops or parking blocks?
Those might be effective. They create issues for street sweeping, and so it's not our preferred solution. But they would, it would be one more 6-inch barrier for and then the vehicle would hit that a few moments before hitting the regular curb, so that might have helped.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the ones I see normally aren't that tall, and they're also sloped. So if somebody's going to be able to jump a 6-inch vertical curb, that thing is, that's not going to slow them. I don't see that making a difference at that point. I mean, the amount of the amount of gas it takes to jump a 6-inch vertical curb at speed bumps or a wheel stop is not even a speed bump.
Other questions? Public comment?
Sure. Mike. Alan Kains, Solano Avenue Association. If Zari's is really worried about that one particular space, there's a lot of spaces on Solano that are parallel, mixed with vertical. I believe there's, the nearest one would be in front of Cornell School, and the next one up the street would be in front of the Prin's Chiropractic office. So rather than putting a pole there, it's going to be covered in graffiti in about a week, possibly bent over. If there's concern with that one location, just switch it over to parallel parking in that one spot. Thank you.
I guess I didn't realize, so there's a parallel spot there already and an angled spot? Is that what I understood the commenter to be saying?
He's saying there is currently parallel parking on Solano, and there are a couple of instances of that around this area.
Oh, I see, but it's not, I
One-
thought he was
one
saying
in front of the-
it was mixed in this location, but,
It's not mixed in this location.
okay, all right, that's kind of what I thought.
It's mixed in front of Prin's in that area. It's consistent in the block
Right.
in front of the Y on Solano.
Okay, and how many spaces are there in front of Zari's that are angle?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay,
4 or 5.
Yeah, they all are.
and so is your suggestion to
4.
turn all of them into,
Oh, 5.
Right before the driveway in front of Zari's.
right?
One space.
I'm going to reiterate that for the microphone. He's proposing just that last space before the driveway after Zari's eastbound.
But that's,
I think it would
that
just be
doesn't
one
look like the one
space.
that was jumped to damage the building. He's talking about this one, right?
Right, so
Yeah, I mean,
you're,
it must have been the third.
you want to come up? Thanks. And we can have a little back and forth.
I'm just going off the staff report.
Wait till you're at the mic.
So I'm just going off the staff report, and that says that, this happens because the way that the parking is angled, and that the way to eliminate it would be to have parallel parking. It just seems to be the simplest, most temporary solution. Because I can just imagine Zari's moving out and the next person coming in going, where did these bollards come from? I mean, it's one of those things. It wasn't part of the original street design. Will lightning strike a third time? It's possible. But there just has to be other alternatives or something that can be explored other than, big cement rails.
But the space that would have to be converted to a parallel parking couldn't,
You can do just
wouldn't be the
two
edge.
spaces right there.
Probably be the 3, though, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't be a one-to-one, I don't think, the length of the,
Costs. If you want to be safe, that's the way you do it. You're only risking a car-to-car accident, whereas if you're going like this, you're risking car-to-buildings. I'm just going off your own staff report, the simplest solution in this case. 12 people die a year in their showers. Are we going to, go and rebuild everybody's
Sure.
showers? I don't know. A few cars get hit once in a while on Solano. It's a tragic thing. It's horrible. Statistics are a funny thing. Those 3 accidents occurred ever since the Marin configuration. Maybe people are in a rush when they're using Solano now. Maybe they're distracted by the parkway. I don't know. But I'm just saying, rather than a bollard, a possible solution may be parallel park. I'm not a traffic engineer. So.
okay, thank you. Other public comments on this?
And almost to kind of piggyback to add a little bit more, I don't think it's the issue is just limited to Zari's. I think it's a problem whenever you park in somewhere. I live in Pinole, and where the Trader Joe's and the Pete's Coffee is over there. I don't know if you know Pinole Valley Road, but I've seen many cars go through those the Chipotle and the optometry place next door to it. So it's just a problem when you pull in the park. So I'm afraid of if you just limit it to Zari's, I don't think cars are targeting Zari's. But just consider you're setting a standard for the whole street. So that's it.
Thank you.
Wow, how old is that picture?
Well, they're creating a little dining area.
I know, that wasn't even, how long has that been in there? Okay, so. I'm just saying, I'm making reference to the age of
You don't want to sound old, do you?
10/2014.
All right, so I remember way back when, I'm dating myself again. Somebody has to. Anyway, the design of the streetscape and everything else like that, it was, the whole design element was designed a certain way. It had to be done with this kind of a bench or that kind of a sign. In fact, when my grandmother's bench, when we had that put in her memory, it had to come out of this specific catalog because all these poles and everything, the streetscape was supposed to look a certain way. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to start adding these things like round cement balls in front of people's places. It just doesn't seem like the right look for the cityscape that we were trying to make happen back then. And so I'd really like to know, are we veering off of that now? Or are we just saying that every business can go just put in whatever kind of a funky thing that they want to put in front of their business, A? B, the ADA accessible standards, I don't know how that addresses to that fact. And then also just, and I think you already mentioned it, if, say, Zari's, sadly as it would be, were to disappear and another business were to come in and they come in here and they're looking at this big round cement ball, who's now responsible to take that out if they don't want it? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you. And if anyone who commented didn't fill out a public speaking card, that would be great if you could fill one out. Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, so back to the commission for comments. Anyone want to start?
So I'll start. The parallel parking, we turned 4 angle parking spaces into 2 parallel parking spaces. That's physically viable. On the other hand, I'm looking at a street light and a tree and another pole, possibly a street light. So 3 of the 4 spaces already have some sort of obstacle in front of them. I could picture a bike rack or something in the remaining space. And honestly, that would be functional, where a bollard has one function. Bike rack kind of has 2 functions. You get to use it every day, and every once in a blue moon, maybe it keeps a car from driving into Zari's again. So I think the aesthetics is something that's worth considering. Just, a bollard that has no function other than being a barrier isn't as attractive. Certainly there are places where if there's space, you could do a granite block to sit on, and if you pin that down, that could be a pretty solid barrier too. So there's things that could be done. I don't think the city should undertake to do them. We should perhaps permit them. Another consideration is I have no idea where the utilities are under this sidewalk, but I bet you see a lot of pole boxes out there. So, drilling and putting in bollards that have deep anchors may not be a trivial thing in any case. I do think that some aesthetic consideration should be given to what is used as a barrier, but it really ought to be by permit, that we permit a business to put something in. If it's a bike rack, I would certainly support it. I'd hate to see someone's bike get crushed, but better than a person getting crushed, if that's the concern. I don't personally like the aesthetic of bollards up and down the sidewalk, in addition to my concern about whether or not we'd be interfering with utilities. Those are just my thoughts.
Just a quick follow-up on that for staff. Does Zari's have a preference of what they want to do? Or they mention anything to staff?
They wrote and spoke to the commission. They brought up bollards. As you can see, there are physical impediments in several of the spaces. I think it would just be the one space, but we haven't discussed other alternatives with them directly.
Okay. Would you like to speak, please, quickly?
Just one other quick consideration. The pedestrians on this, I know we said handicap, but as a parent who's pushed a double stroller and a stroller, they now have seating out there, which is wonderful. A bollard right there or anything else, that's the only spot where you can kind of duck out of the way as people are coming out of Five Little Monkeys to have traffic going in 2 directions on the sidewalk. So I think we need to start thinking about that on Solano a little bit more. I think I brought up pedestrians twice, but it seems like we're really focused on bikes, putting in bike racks and all those things. We're kind of pushing in on our sidewalks and our parking spaces to put in all of those things. So just think about how people are walking in front of the businesses too.
Thank you. Preston?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the staff report said did it have sidewalk widths listed in any case? If it did, I think they were too wide. So for instance, I know in front of, I think it's As You Wish, the yogurt place, you know, it was that wide when there were grates over the tree wells. There's no grate anymore. And it's really between the street furniture and the tree walls, like 4 feet wide now, you know, so it's really sub width for a street of this nature. So yeah, I'm not in favor of constraining it further. And as far as the bike rack idea, I like that idea. I wish it would help, but you know, I think we underrate the power of a vehicle. That's why people use vehicles, because they're so powerful. And a bike rack like a wheel block would be just like, they would hardly even notice it. They would just mow it right over, because they're not designed as a barrier. Now, one of the U-racks, if it was actually drilled and installed, which is not how we do it here because it's much more expensive, that may or may not, but the kinds of racks we're using, which are just lag bolted in, that would just get knocked right over. I'm actually not in favor of allowing businesses to ad hoc pay for a bollard for a variety of reasons. I mean, one, that the safety of the street is the city's responsibility, not the business's responsibility. So sending a signal like, well, if you want to be safe, you pay for it, and it's our property and we created the problem, but you have to fix it. To me, that's just totally inequitable. And there's also inequitable to say, well, if your business has enough money, you can protect yourself, and if you're not, well, too bad, you're going to run into. So for all those reasons, I think, you know, while I understand the intent of the idea and I appreciate it, and it, you know, it's very bad probability that this particular location was struck twice, it's a fundamental design flaw of this particular configuration of the street, and I think we just have to live with it until we sort of comprehensively do something else, if we choose to do something else.
If I may, I think I agree with most of what's been said. I don't like the idea of bollards. It's a narrow area. Having something in our through space for the flow of pedestrians and micromobility and whatever else ends up on the sidewalk is not a great idea. But I've been looking at this business for months now, thinking about this. The facade of Zari's is actually inset from the sides of the building. They actually have space in the property of the building, I'm assuming, to put their own bollards in. They put out tables currently in that space, which do encroach a bit into the sidewalk, but you know, it's a nice amenity. What if they had you know, low steel bollards that could double as supports for tables that were removable? Or, you know, just put in their own bollards on either side of the door. I agree that a bike rack, even if it's set in the cement, is not really set that far. Mm-hmm. It's designed so it can't be removed and the bikes can't be stolen. It's not designed as a traffic block. And I personally have had a lot of trouble in Berkeley with the some of the meters that have been turned into bike racks in negotiating space with cars trying to pull in while I'm trying to lock up my bike. It's not ideal. Obviously, I should go on the inside, but you know, it's not perfect. And those, again, are not adhered. They're adhered so they can't be stolen, not so that they block cars. I think that the landlord and the owners of Zari's should accomplish this on their own. I think they have options.
Other comments? Agree with everything on the dais? Staff, do you have enough direction?
Yes, I think we will take what you have, and if we need to, we'll touch base with the owners, Zari's, and if we need to, we'll report back.
Okay.
I just want to thank Commissioner McCroskey. That's a good observation, that they do have some setback that they could use to put in their own bollards on their own property. Maybe a close fit. Maybe the city, you know, provides an encroachment of 3 inches if they need the diameter.
Or allows them to undercut the sidewalk to put in some reinforcement, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right. But I think that's a great observation. I appreciate your creativity and observing that. Thanks.
Okay. move back to item 5-4. Does anyone need to take a restroom break? I think we can power through, and we'll probably have to extend time at 9:30. Why don't we go through 5-4, and then we'll see where everything stands.
Thank you, Chair. I put a brief memo together, but I'll hand it over to Commissioner Jordan in a moment. This item is at the request of Commissioner Jordan to revisit the discussion from September regarding the recommendation for the location of the installation of a flashing beacon on Marin Avenue at Talbot Avenue. And I can go back through information on that if it's needed, but I'll hand it over to.
Okay, thanks. And thank you for entertaining further discussion on this. Two particular concerns came to mind after our last meeting about this location. One was that my understanding is that this CIP project is funded at a level of $65,000, and it was envisioned as 3 beacons. We authorized 2 beacons, so presumably there's some funding that might be left over. It also occurred to me that given that it might be possible to partially fund and then find enough funding to put in a bulb out, at least on one side. And part of the motivation for this is that, we spent, well over $1 million on Safe Routes to School for Ocean View and Marin. Now, that wasn't city money, but of that, well over $1 million, a few $100,000 of that was city money in matching. And putting a bulb out, if we can only get it on one side and there's a drain on one side, so that probably would not be the side to do it because it's more expensive. We'd also shorten the crossing distance, and I presume the engineering of these beacons is such that the amount of time they have flash for is related to the crossing distance. I don't know, is that the case? Yeah, so if you shorten the crossing distance, then you shorten the flasher time on the beacon, which is going to help the flow of motorists on Marin as well, which I'm pretty concerned with given the backups that I've observed. So that was one, and maybe I'll stop there when we talk about that instead of going on to the next one.
So you think that there's enough budget with the 2 rapid flashing beacons and to add in an additional PED bulb for 65,000?
Well, so the numbers that staff gave me, they said, so it was 65,000. So if you divide that in 3, the 2 that we authorized are 40,000 plus a little bit. Staff said a bulb out would cost 50,000. So it wouldn't get us all the way there, but it would get us a lot of way there. And while 20,000, 25,000 sounds like a lot, just to put it in perspective, my understanding of city code, and not that this is the way this would go down, is that staff for a $25,000 purchase, which is to be more than that, but just to give you a scale of the additional funding we're talking about here, a $25,000 purchase, I believe the city manager or even department heads are authorized to approve that without going to city council. So just for scale, it's a small amount of money in the context of the amount of money that the city spends. The other issue that staff brought up was that adding a bulb out to this project would delay installing the beacon. And do we want to do that? And my thought on that was, my understanding is the beacon is a self-contained apparatus with no utilities. Therefore, it could be installed now or as soon as possible, and then that unit could be moved at the time if and when a bulb out is built. And I presume the timing is flexible, so there's some way to reprogram the thing to match the new timing. So I don't see, and I'm, if staff sees other reasons, it seems like it'd be possible to do it in a phased approach so that we're not delaying the near-term improvement.
Okay. Questions?
Is a bulb out the only solution? We just looked at Bollards. Yeah. Would it be less expensive to put a couple of bollards at the edge of where you would normally put a bulb out?
I do not know. I can observe that from the so-called protected intersection at Hopkins and the Alameda, that by and large, and maybe the behavior's changed because I haven't observed it recently, that even there where you actually have a curbed island sidewalk users do not go out to that. They do not cross the cycle track out to that island for whatever reason. So you end up with the crosswalk being exactly as long as it was before. And so I would be nervous about that approach, that pedestrians are not going to feel sufficiently confident to actually go out onto the asphalt behind where the bollards are. So it's not really going to accomplish the goal of making the pedestrian stand where they're going to be visible and they're going to feel secure. They're still going to be withdrawn from the corner. So part of the goal of the bulb out is both safety, obviously, and that's one of the primary reasons we use them. And I think having it on the north side in particular is the side that the visibility is less, because you've got parked cars, vehicles on the street, and then you have eastbound motorists. And so if you have a bulb out there.
South side.
Thank you. The south side, yeah. And so you have eastbound motorists, and the visibility of that crosswalk is blocked by the parked vehicles. And so if you put a bulb out in there, you solve that, which bulb outs do, and you maintain the street parking, you shorten the distance.
I understand the goal. Do you really significantly increase the visibility if the bulb out is still behind the parked cars?
Yeah, because the bulb out would come out to the edge of the cycling lane, and so you have a much longer sight line between the motorist and where the pedestrian stands.
Sight line.
Yeah.
I see, the angled sight line. Okay.
I'm looking on Street View. Is the crosswalk ramps there new from the project?
Yeah, they're new from the project. Yeah, so that's unfortunate, but I mean, as Mark Hurley said, those ramps were freebies to us because there was such demolition there to do the undergrounding that the utility companies realized they had to basically rebuild the whole thing to standard. So while, it's unfortunate, it would have been nice if we could have gotten it done then. It happened sort of spontaneously very late in the project, and there was no time to leverage that effort.
Do we have a moratorium requirement on new construction?
I don't know.
Like a warranty kind of issue or something with the contract?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd have to look.
Cities have other cities have 5-year moratoriums on construction?
So there will be moratoriums sometimes on trenching in the street.
Yeah.
But for something like this, I don't think there would be an issue as long as, I'm assuming, well, actually the project's still going on. AT&T is not finished yet.
But that's a city requirement or a city moratorium.
Yeah, it's a city, so we could waive our own requirements if we needed to do that.
Well, it's also a moratorium, as I understand it, against breaching maintained pavement, asphalt, which this hasn't been repaved. I mean, you can see it right there, so.
This is a very old picture.
Okay.
At least, I think, what, 6, 7?
You want to come up if you want to talk? Thank you.
I'm just going to say something brief and then we're going to leave. So,
Is that a promise?
it's a promise and a threat. I am a parent at Cornell Elementary School. I went to Cornell Elementary School. We've always had crossing guards at all of these corners, which I know is an issue with the school district. Anyway, that being said, traffic is mounting up horrifically up Marin ever since that new little cement area was put in at Marin right before San Pablo. I beg you guys to really do some investigation, talk to parents, find out what the real issues are there before you make any sort of decisions on this at all. Because I know in the morning, it's a much different traffic flow than at any other time of the day. And what's happening is it's becoming unsafe for us parents to drop our kids off at Cornell because it's so backed up and people are getting so angry and they're almost basically running over other people's kids just to try to get their kid in the door on time. So now I'm not a late parent. I get them there get my daughter there at 8:15 every morning, but it's still a nightmare. So I just really encourage you guys to really investigate with the parents at Cornell before you do anything here.
If I could ask a question.
Yeah, please.
Where are you dropping off out of curiosity? Or where do you see, are you dropping off on Marin?
I'm dropping off at Talbot. I'm
On Talbot.
So I come down, so I'm on the hill on Pierce. I come down Solano. I make a right on Talbot. I drop my daughter off at that middle gate there, and then I try to drive the rest of the way down the street, but it's already all blocked up right there. I mean, people are constantly trying to, because there's also a preschool on the other side of on the road. So there's preschool drop-off and elementary school drop-off happening at the same time. We all know today's drivers are terrible. I'm also looking out for cyclists because they're driving down, dropping off their kids at this time too, and they're weaving in between the cars and stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of safety issues going on in the middle of the block, much more than I think at the end of the block, because we can't even get down to the end of the block to make a right turn to go back up to Pierce. So I'm just saying, be very cautionary at what you do with this intersection. Make sure that you have full public, you know, acknowledgement that this is what's going on, especially by the parents at Cornell School and the people that live on that block. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, it does remind me of talking to the crossing guard there who said, and that this was a while ago, that motorists were still blasting through even when they were out there. So, I mean, I think the flashing beacon could really help them reinforce their message. But to close the bulb out conversation first.
Thank you for volunteering your time.
Thanks. Good night. Sorry, Preston. So the phasing again, if we were to do this, you would put in the rapid flashing beacons first, and then the remaining funding we would use to try to leverage to get additional funds from staff to put in the PED bulb outs.
Right. I mean, if they could go in at the same time, great, but don't hold up the beacon. I mean, presumably, if the funding is found for the bulb out, I believe there's a significant pavement project coming up in 2020. I don't know if that's anticipated for the summer or where that's at, but I presume this could be part of that contract, since that would usually involves concrete work and ramp work. So, but in any case, yeah, phase it if it needs to be phased. If it can be done all at once, do it all at once.
So if we phase it, it's basically two separate projects, which is fine. I think bulb outs along Marin are a good thing. We've always wanted to try to add them when the opportunity came up. If there's money left over from the beacons, that seems like a good seed to get us started on bulb outs here. If it needs some public discussion, some time to find more money, okay, let's go through that process. I agree that the beacons are pretty easy to relocate. You got to put in a new pole foundation, but that's
nothing
minimal really by comparison to the cost of the hardware. So I don't see any need to undo or hold up the beacon project. Let's make that happen and then figure out an opportunity to get some bulb outs added.
Yeah, and so to be clear, I'm only proposing a bulb out on one side for cost reasons, and this side because the other side has a storm drain inlet like right there. So, basically
There's better visibility westbound because of the street opening.
Exactly, right. And so I'm trying to targeted intervention, with, minimal funding, maximal benefit is the idea.
I want to thank the commission for, I was absent last time, and you guys reviewed these flashing beacons locations. I think you made some good decisions. I also understand Preston had some ideas about adjusting the mechanism so that it could be changed. Did you guys talk about that?
We haven't talked about it yet.
Oh, okay.
And I want to get through the bulb out first.
Let me just say that
If I can pause, we need a motion to extend time.
I move that we extend until as much as 10.
I second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, keep going.
So putting that aside, I did some observation down there recently, and at least the crossing guard who's working there now has a very strong control over the kids and parents who come there, to the extent that she has them wait at the curb until she reaches the center, traffic is stopped, and then she invites them into the crosswalk. And they're very cooperative. So I don't think there's any additional mechanism required initially.
Well, so could we do that? Could we finish the bulb out first and then talk about that part?
You want to talk about that also?
So I'm
But certainly, what I've seen, the bulb out would still be useful with the crossing guard, and absolutely when the crossing guard is not there.
right. So I don't know if a motion's appropriate or what.
Yeah, we can ask staff.
What's the mechanism here?
It looks like we're amending the motion from the last meeting on this item.
Or I could just make a new motion. I mean, so the last one can just stand that we approve the beacon, and, you know, the new motion could be, we approve or we recommend the installation of a bulb out on the south side of Marin, or on the, a bulb out into Marin on the southwest corner of Marin and Talbot at such time as funding is available, to be done at the same time as the beacon if possible, but if not, to be done at a later time.
I'll second that.
Right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, moves forward.
So then the only other thing, was some real, I realized after we approved the last time, well, there is a crossing guard here, and I don't know what the interaction of a crossing guard and a beacon is. The beacon is on continuous recall, so if anybody comes up and pushes it, it's going to go on, whether the crossing guard wants it to go on and is out there or not. I don't know if there are any crossing guards with these kinds of devices in Berkeley anywhere. Are there crossing guards in Berkeley? I don't really know what happens in Berkeley for.
There are, but yeah, to have an override device for the beacon.
Well, no, I guess I wasn't, I didn't want to take the conversation that far. Just if you have a plain vanilla beacon, the way they're designed, and you have a crossing guard there, sounds like you haven't heard any issues with that. But I don't know if there's any places in Berkeley where there are both. I mean, does Virginia Chaddock have a crossing guard? Because that's right next to the Arts Magnet.
MLK might have a crossing guard at times.
And that has a beacon.
It does have a beacon.
Yeah, okay.
The crossing guard can push the button. I mean, that's pretty normal.
Right.
Certainly traffic signals that are pedestrian actuated, they do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess more my concern was, kids run up and push the button and push the button and push the button, and the thing is like never turns off, and then
You can
that degrades.
definitely program it with a lockout time.
Okay.
And the crossing guards also have pretty strict control of how you interact at the intersection and what
Okay.
happens. So if the crossing guard were to say, I press the button,
Yeah.
I
That's
think all
going to
the
happen.
kids would
I guess
know
it's elementary
she
school.
presses the button.
Okay. Well, I kind of like the idea of, I guess maybe what is coming out of this for me is perhaps it would be useful to ask staff to actually talk to I guess it's a crossing guard contractor now, and kind of let them know this is coming and see if they have any thoughts about it. Just, I mean, even if as just a matter of basic respect, they're the ones that are out there doing the job. So let them know what's happening and what do they think of it? Do they even know anything about these? And get their feedback. And I'm not asking that it needs to come back here, but it is good to know, and I think for staff to know, because I did ask this question of, are these things, do they have a recall interval? And the answer was no, they're just on, one person walks up, pushes it, 10 seconds later another, so you could just keep the thing on all the time. So the fact that they can be programmed to have an interval, I think, is useful feedback and could make the difference if a problem does develop. So I think with that.
My understanding is the interim approval or whatever of them is that they're supposed to be able to be activated every time they're pressed. But I assume, yes, the software, you can program it however you would do.
We haven't had trouble with the one at Curtis, have we?
Not that I've
There's
heard
no
about.
crossing guard there.
But it is next to a stoplight at the next intersection, and it could potentially cause the problems that I think that you haven't stated explicitly, but I think you're worried about exacerbating traffic issues on Marin.
Oh yeah, for motorists. I mean, we just heard it's already Well, and we've heard from staff, that as when we discussed it, when we termed the bulb out too far, that's how I referred to it, the bulb out at Kains is causing a bottleneck that is rippling way back up the street. And so I'm just concerned adding something else, could just make things that much worse. So, I mean, obviously I voted for the beacon, so I'm not opposed to that, but just the idea that it could be on, 90% of the time concerns me.
And it's not a red light either. So if it's on and there's someone crossing, then it is interrupting traffic flow. If it's on and someone's finished crossing, cars can go. I think to some extent that behavior tends to manage itself, because I haven't heard complaints about the situation you described.
Okay. All right.
I understand the concern about exacerbating tensions and causing traffic flowing into parallel routes. At the same time, we're trying to prioritize pedestrian safety and pedestrian priority. So I think we leave it to address as it arises.
Yeah. Thank you for the discussion.
All right.
And the extra information.
Okay, so moving on. 5.6, Albany Active Transportation Plan, signing and striping plan, remaining segments.
Thank you, Chair. So there was a request for update on where we're at with the current implementation of the ATP striping and signage program. I'll walk through it briefly. Prior to the work done this summer, a number of segments were done as repaving and resurfacing work was progressing through the city. There was decision to accelerate that and to do it all in a larger chunk. This summer, that was completed on these stretches as shown. There was an intention for it to be more the entire network. We realized that there are a number of segments that were not done that were in the design, and so we are planning to do them this coming season. The segments that are designed from the larger package that was done of the signage and striping implementation are shown in red now here, and so those are the ones that we have completed design work and are remaining. And then there are a few that are separate projects. So Kains Adams has been discussed previously. Brighton has been folded into the North Albany traffic calming, which we are working on and will bring back to the commission earlier next year. So that was the update. There was one question that I pulled out as a separate item since we have a conflict of interest or whatever.
Okay. It's an information item, known in the public, so we can do questions and comments together. Anyone want to start?
I'm sorry, which is the potential conflict of interest?
Sorry, I pulled out discussion of Talbot where I have a question for the commission as a separate item.
Right, thank you. So it's right.
Distinguish it from the rest of the.
Thank you.
Anyone?
I'd
Yes,
just like to say thank you for the materials you put into this meeting, staff. All the pictures we've gotten with the items and this map is fabulous. Unlike our rec department guide that comes out regularly, you have accurately represented UC Village. So if you live in UC Village, you can actually find yourself on this map and feel like part of Albany. Sorry, I got off my soapbox. Thank you. It's really helpful, and I'm a very visual person, so it makes a huge difference for me. And I think it's been very constructive in our meeting. And it's exciting to see these things going in. I know personally I got some pushback from some residents as things were going in this summer. Questions about what was going on. Why is there a bike lane being painted in my street in the parking lane and things like that. But it seems to have shaken out. And are you getting complaints?
Feedback I've received There were some questions as it was going in on Peralta until the striping was completed, but haven't heard much since it all settled down there. Santa Fe had some issues. The striping that was installed,
we might have to step out of the room.
Well, we're not, I don't think, making any decisions. This is information, but the dashed line was done in a spacing that matched up with the angled line, so it looks like there's some kind of intentional T delineating parking when it's just supposed to be a dashed line, so that's caused some confusion, but haven't gotten complaints once the explanation was made to a few residents that were asking about what it was supposed to be meaning. Those are the main areas that I've heard back in terms of what we installed. I have heard positive feedback for the thing that was a little different with it in terms of dashing out the door zone within our bike lanes on a couple locations that were put in. I've generally heard positive feedback on how that works and what that communicates to folks. And aside from that, the only other thing I was going to mention, I forgot to do at the beginning, was signage. I didn't spell out in here, but the signage plan is relatively consistent with what we've put in the ground on striping. And so I've also worked through what signs we did install and what's remaining from our plans.
Other comments, questions? Preston?
So there's some little, I mean, I'll send you the list, but there's some little bits missing. So from Curtis from Sonoma to Marin, I believe is in the striping plan, and is part of that route.
So there are bike routes in the active transportation plan, but some of those, the ones that are shown as dashed and have lines on this map as bike routes, there are routes that didn't get designed in the design package, but I'll double check.
Yeah, so I can't recall if that's in the striping plan or not, but maybe it should be shown as another project then. I don't know, just for completeness. I see. So I guess that's why Brighton between Masonic and Key Route's not shown, because it was not designed.
Yeah, so there are some segments, sorry, it's unclear on the screen a little bit, but there are, the underlay for what I drew here is I believe the general plan map. And so it shows all the bike routes. The design package that was completed for implementation did not include all of those.
Okay.
So there are some gaps still in that we either need to do design or will design as we do resurfacing work.
Thanks. I did have a question about why this was done in two pieces. I mean, I thought when the contract went out last summer, the way it was represented, and maybe I misunderstood, it was like, oh, it's all finally going to get done. So I was kind of like shocked and amazed to see, for instance, just one block of Talbot get done. Do you know why that occurred?
That was the intention. I don't know how it ended up being partial. I haven't figured that out.
Okay. Yeah, because I just haven't seen any other city do it this way. And it seems like it would increase the expense to be doing, a block here and a block there at a time. Thank you for preparing this, by the way. I don't know how many people requested this, or commissioners. I know I requested it, so to the extent it was prepared in response to that, thank you very much.
I second that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we move to the next item.
See you later.
See ya.
Go use the water.
Yeah, 15 minutes. Good. All right, item 5-7 is active transportation plan, signing and striping plan for Talbot Avenue.
Yeah, so I think this is a quick item, but I wanted to check in with the commission just because in comparing the full set of designs and what we implemented this summer for Talbot, the prior full set of designs and what was implemented prior to this year was sharrows on the street, which was installed for the block from Solano to Portland. This summer for the design, which again included just the one block, was for bike boulevards, but it added it did install 2 signs that were consistent with our bike route Sharrow pattern rather than the bike boulevard signage. So just seeking direction as we look to do the rest of the installation. Was the newer one a thinking, or was there a discussion of bike boulevard, or is there consensus that we should go ahead with it as a bike boulevard consistent with the newer installation? Or should we be doing what was designed for the full stretch, which was Sharrow's? I think the street matches the characteristics of some of our bike boulevards, and we installed that this summer on one block. So my recommendation is to switch the rest of the street to the bike boulevard stencils, but wanted to have that discussion before we went out and did that.
Since there is an action, right, requested from the commission? Yes. Since there's an action, why don't we take questions first? Any questions from the commission? Seeing none?
Oh, is there a cost difference?
It's a little more paint, but it's negligible.
All right. On to comments or a motion?
I'd be happy to move the staff recommendation.
Have a second?
I second that.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none? Okay, we're moving forward with staff recommendation.
So Preston has 2 microphones. Did you notice that?
He's only using one.
It's a conference.
Triangulated.
Diplomat. Item 6, announcements. 6.1 is changes to conflict of interest standard.
Yeah, this was on the agenda in September. I just wanted to reiterate, since a couple of the commissioners weren't here in September, that there were changes to the standard that include now a different standard for 500 to 1,000 feet radius. So there's a new map provided to you that shows that. We talked through it in a little more detail in September and sent some information out after that, but I'll send it out again as a reminder for the commissioners that weren't here for that discussion. And if you have questions, you can get in touch with us.
Any other questions or comments on that item?
I look forward to seeing the information. If I got it before, I'm sorry, I missed it. Reading the minutes, it wasn't clear to me.
Yeah, there is information, right, that was given at the last meeting.
So in summary, if you live within 500 feet of a project, you definitely have to recuse yourself. That new state law has introduced kind of a gray zone between 500 and 1,000, where if it's determined or judged to be the project to have a material impact on your property, you would also have to recuse yourself. And so the kinds of language that they use include if you would change a parcel's development potential, income potential, highest and best use, market value, or substantially change the character by altering traffic levels, intensity, use, parking, view, privacy, noise, air quality. So there's this quite a big gray area now. Little things I don't think you would have to worry about, but larger projects in that between 500 feet and 1,000 feet, we're probably going to try to remind you to think a little bit about that before you participate. We always err on the side of caution just because we think that sets a really good example, and also because you're subject to the violation fines, not us.
Yeah.
So
I'm assuming this hasn't really been tested yet in the legal space because it's new.
I don't think it's only been in place for a few months, but it's. And I don't know that we've had an occasion for anyone to call FPPC on this particular issue, but I'm sure we will have it tested because of the density of our city. Yeah, right. Sooner or later, we're going to be in that zone.
Yeah.
For some or all of you.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? The announcement?
I just think it's worth noting, I forgot about the 1,000 feet, and So what we just did on San Pablo in terms of red zones,
You would have been.
I was just within it was just about 20 feet outside of 1,000 feet from my house. So thankfully, but cautionary note, because I
don't think that would have had a substantial impact on.
probably not, but
we
it
could
would have
agree
been
on
better
that.
if I was aware and had thought about that beforehand. Made a conscious decision.
I think it would be more likely if you were looking at a development project or something that was having a major impact,
Right.
on parking in the neighborhood, then it would start to be.
Yeah, so like the townhome project, if there was any transportation commission nexus with that, because that's within 1,000 feet of where I live. I don't know,
Yeah,
as
I'm
an
not sure
example.
that would rise to that level.
Yeah.
But it would be definitely worthwhile to ask that question and pause.
Right, yeah.
Of it.
So I'm glad this came back.
And I was just going to also note that you've seen her name on a number of the reports, but Gracielita Diaz has accepted another position, so she is no longer working with us, but we thanked her for the San Francisco County Transportation Authority.
She was an intern or a?
She's a graduate student and was an intern in our office since last spring.
We're happy for her. It was a good career opportunity,
Sure.
career development opportunity, and more money and more hours, and she's a student at USF, so it all kind of fit together.
Oh, nice. Good for her. Wish her well. All right. Item 7 is future agenda items.
Upcoming agenda items in the queue, we have discussion on the Albany sidewalk program, an update on that. The Washington Ave reconstruction is the next roadway resurfacing reconstruction project under design, and North Albany traffic calming, and in January will be selection of new chair, vice chair.
Any comments or questions from the commission?
We had a letter that
Right.
asked us to address cost-effective online applications for parking permits and how that might change the equation in Albany. I'm not pushing for that, I just wanted to raise the comment.
And that's already been somewhat explored, right, under the parking study?
Well, the letter's about new technology.
Oh.
And in Berkeley, implementing the online process. And we haven't had any large-scale requests for permitting recently. I'm not sure that really raises to the level that we want to take it up.
Well, I'll also note it's not on our work plan. So, it's probably kind of maybe a bit early to check in on sort of where we're at on our work plan, but that needs to be our first priority, and we really can't work on it. I mean, if we wanted to work on that, we'd have to send an agenda.
Just the work plan, sure.
Speaking of our work plan, the change in season and time has brought the lighting to the forefront of my interest. And we have lighting that's kind of on a block-by-block scale, not a human scale. And that is in our work plan to address. And I would like to propose addressing that sooner rather than later. And I think the winter is a good time to think about that.
What would staff's approach be to that? Would you need consultant services?
Public Works has started pulling together language for putting out an RFQ for consultant services, but I don't think that's been issued yet.
Okay. Anything else on future agenda items?
So I always put in a plug for the standards.
Yeah.
There's a few things that I think we should consider changing or adding or refining.
Yeah. And that is on our work plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was a mention at the beginning of the meeting to look at the Washington Avenue traffic calming project or post-project.
Yes. To revisit and follow up and see how that's working.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Anything else? All right, next meeting is Thursday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. And we are adjourned. Happy holidays, everyone.
We have 5 minutes.
This is the bathroom.